Welcome back to Family Law and More. My name is Tait and I'm a pupil barrister here at Unit Chambers.
Hi, I'm Lisa Edmunds.
And today we're joined by our chairman, Roger Draper, and one of our newest pupils, Isabel Clarke, to discuss how to approach the pupillage gateway and written applications. So this is part of our pupillage series, and today we are going to be talking about the first step, the written application.
So maybe to kick things off, Rog, if you can just outline your involvement in how UNIT engages in the pupillage process.
Well, first of all, my name is Roger Draper. I'm chairman of UNIT, and I work with our amazing support team on the business side of Chambers activity and really give oversight on the sort of driving UNIT strategy forward. And obviously a key part of that is recruiting and retaining the very best people. So if we don't have the right people on board, then we're not going to be a great Chambers. So that's my role, or part of my role at UNIT Chambers.
And Bella's mentioned the star of this episode. So that's our current pupil, Isabel. So Isabel, do you want to sort of highlight your experience in terms of applying for pupillage here and maybe anywhere else?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the most recent person to go through the pupillage application process, which is why I thought it might be useful for anyone listening to just hear it from sort of my perspective and how I found the whole application process. So I was very lucky in terms of the offer was received on the 5th of May and then I started on the 30th of May. So got straight in there really. So I've got a lot of recent experience. I should be able to help any of the listeners that are concerned and starting to go through the applications.
Well, it's really helpful to have you here, Isabel. And also I have recently gone through it as well. And I know that our listeners really want to hear firsthand experience from what has happened, how we've approached it, because it's scary. It's really competitive and you want to know about how to tailor yourself for particular chambers. So hopefully we'll be able to give some unit chambers insight, but also just general advice, because I did a lot of pupillage applications. I don't know about you, Isabel, but I did a lot. So I got to the point where I was really feeling like I knew how to hit the boxes in terms of the structure, the approach, because the written application, it's written advocacy, it's selling yourself. So that is what we do in this job. We do advocacy. So it's the first step in trying to show yourself as an advocate. And that can be intimidating, but I think if you break it down, it's doable and you have ways of hitting those boxes.
Was this your first round of applying?
No, so I applied for pupillage when I was in bar school. I applied, got first round interviews and second round interviews, but I didn't get pupillage. I then took a year off because I wanted to get some experience and also just sort of get my head in the right place, because I didn't really feel like in bar school I was in the right place to be making these really big, scary applications for things that I found very intimidating. And then my second time of applying, I got pupillage.
And how about you, Isabel?
Yeah, I was the same as Bella. So I did a few speculative applications whilst I was on the bar course, had a couple of interviews and things. But I think in hindsight, I wasn't ready at that point in time anyway. So just got some more experience under my belt and then tried again. And I was luckily successful on the second occasion.
Yeah. So I think the first place we should start with is actually making sure we make the deadlines, because you certainly won't get an interview if your application is late. So Rog, would you be able to go through the deadlines and the sort of structure of when we should be paying attention to things and getting applications in?
Yeah, the BSB have made it a pretty structured process over the last couple of years, and that's really improved the whole system. There's a few sort of glicks in the system still, which we'll come to at the end, which causes people a few headaches, particularly if pupils get multiple offers. It can cause some angst and some backlog along the line. Okay, so the first key deadline is Thursday, the 7th of September, and that's when any aspiring barristers can set up their accounts on the Pupillage Gateway, begin uploading their information related to academic work experience, and so on. We then move to the 27th of November, that's a Monday, and at 12:01 a.m, BSB are very specific, applicants can actually access the Pupillage Gateway to sort of browse all the vacancies that are in place. Probably the key date is Wednesday, the 3rd of January, just before midnight at 11:59, when literally that's when the window opens for applications. So people can start to put their applications in, and they can even edit their applications as they go along. And then they've got until, Chambers have got until sort of 7th of February at 11:59 again. And that's when the submission windows for applications close. So no further applications after that time. So basically between the 3rd of January and the 7th of February are pretty key dates. There's then often a bit of a gap because that's when all the interviews take place and chambers operate at different paces. We at Unit like to get our interviews, certainly our first phase interviews in early. Quite a few chambers leave it late. But basically, once the interviews are finished, nobody then is allowed to say anything or do anything until Friday, the 10th of May at 9:30 a.m. And that's when people can actually, chambers can start ringing around making offers.
Yeah, feels like the longest wait in the world.
Yeah, and then the final part of the process is then once those offers are made, it's normally we have quite a personal approach because we tend to sort of ring everyone. People can either say yes immediately, or they've actually got a week. And that's where if the multiple offers come in, it can cause a little bit of a backlog because everyone's waiting and there's a bit of a sort of game of chess actually going on, both with the applicants and chambers as well. So, Friday the 17th of May is when it's all done and dusted. So that's the process that the BSB have put in place.
Okay, well, that's really helpful because we do need to know those dates to make sure that we're getting our applications in on time. Now, Rog, you have probably read... How many pupillage applications do you think you've read at this point?
Well, I've done 4 cycles of pupillage applications and we tend to get about 140, 150.
All right, so nearing 1,000.
Probably about 600 or 700.
Yeah.
But obviously in my career, I've probably looked at hundreds of thousands of sort of applications. But I think the pupillage process is, as you say, it's pretty brutal and it's a really fascinating process going through all of those applications and CVs.
So do you have any tips and tricks for like a really well-crafted written application, something that stands out to you that as a thing you should do with your written application?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the one thing that often stands out for me, I'm often surprised with, is what you shouldn't do. So we'll quite often have, cover letters saying, I really want to work with Catherine Hughes, who I love at Unit Chambers. And of course, Catherine's at Exchange Chambers. Or I've always aspired to work at Atlantic Chambers. And you go, so the first thing is attention to detail. Always check your forms and you'll be surprised how many people just do not, make the cut because if they can't get the basics right. And also, it just shows sloppiness and lack of attention to detail that if you're applying to a chambers and you put in the wrong information down just because you cut and pasted it because you splattergun in 30 applications or what have you. So that's one of the first things I would say.
Yeah.
I would also say, everyone's done moots and endless mini pupillages and everyone's got, law degrees, tend to have law degrees and their education and their work experience and so on. But the thing I always like is just that elevator pitch at the start of the cover letter. And often I was like, it's a personal thing, but I know other people, I like things in 3s. So, the things that stand out for me are when people go, dear Unit Chambers, here's why I want to join Unit, why Unit, why I want to be a family barrister, and why me.
Yeah.
And I think at the top of that is a 30-second elevator pitch executive summary. So many people delve straight into the detail. So as you're going through, it's just a laundry list of moots, mini pupillages, GCSEs, and so on. What we're actually looking for is actually, okay, tell us in 30 seconds something that's going to stand out about you, Bella, you, Isabel, you, Lisa, and then tell us why you want to be part of Unit, why you want to be a family barrister, and why we at Unit should hire you. So I would, the rule of 3, keep it simple and get that elevator pitch in.
I don't know if anyone else has heard the phrase. I heard it when I was at university writing essays of tell him what you're going to tell him what you just told him. And that is sort of true for written advocacy in terms of signposting structure. Your head can follow it better. And so I think that's probably similar in terms of the elevator pitch. And it's the way
the media works. If you think when you watch the news, you get the news headlines, they then go into the detail and then you reiterate the headlines. And it's a very simple process. And all the best applications we get tend to follow that process. But again, we get a lot of, applications that are just a long list of detail and people don't jump out because you want the personality. Obviously, most people have got a law degree. Most people have been to bar school and so on. But what you're looking at is, is this going to be a great person on our team? And are they going to be a great barrister as well?
And so, Isabel, do you have any other tips of what you did in your written applications to try and keep yourself concise, to make sure you weren't making mistakes, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I took it one at a time. I did 1 chambers per, session of application writing. So I think that's really important to avoid the mistake that Roger's just highlighted with dropping in, an incorrect name, anything of that sort, and just doing every single one tailored specifically to that chambers. You might seem to think that the transferable skills parts of it are going to be the same in different applications, but really I don't think they should be. I don't think there should be an opportunity for copying and pasting anything aside from, your grades, your scholarships, etc. I think each application needs to be approached individually at a set period of time so that you're just focusing your concentration and your energy on that one application.
I think you used the phrase earlier, Rog, of scattergun approach, and this is a numbers game. These pupillages are really competitive, and I think certainly in bar school I was really encouraged to do a lot of applications. And my approach when I hit the initial stage of the advertisements went up about who was offering pupillage that I wanted to do, I spent a long time writing down every single chambers that was offering family law pupillage, which is what I wanted to do, north of Birmingham, which was my geographical cutoff line. And then I went through really carefully to decide where I was applying. So I don't think the scattergun approach is particularly effective because you are likely to make those sort of mistakes, and you want to make sure you're at a place you want to be. That's the other part of that I think curating where you want to be will help you focus what you actually want to do, and then your application will be better. So that would be my advice as you do this as well, is focus on the set you want to do, like you said, Isabel, but also think holistically about which sets you would actually want to work at.
I think that's really important, that now one size doesn't fit all. We tend to get a lot of CVs in where they've just done one CV for every chambers, but every chambers is different. Some chambers are more keen on academics. Some chambers are more keen on family law. Some chambers are more keen on the person, and so on. So I think you've just got to be careful if you just put in one CV in, and it's got to be really now, I think, personalised to that chambers. It's got to be really bespoke to that chambers. And as Isabel quite rightly says, you've got to take your time to do that. And it really shows those candidates who haven't taken their time, because as Isabel again said, that they make mistakes, and it tends to be very generic and sort of bland.
That's a really interesting point, Roger. And I think it's particularly important to point out right now that we are a set that asks for a CV and a covering letter, but I think most sets now use the gateway process where it's entirely done through a singular application. And I was just speaking to somebody that got pupillage, and she was saying that the system's now changed on the gateway where you can't actually personalize the information that you've just said. So that would mean that having that approach of figuring out how to make a one size fits all application, that's probably really difficult.
Yeah, it is if you go through the gateway. So I think that remembering that application, the initial information that you put, is going to many sets. So if you're applying for different pupillage types, so common law, family, crime, whatever, it needs to fit all those things. And that sounds like quite a difficult task. So I think probably the best way of approaching it is just thinking, how is this going to read for each set that it's going to get, and then trying to neutralize any of the language that might cause you problems.
Can I ask, in terms of your experience, once the gateway opens, how planned are you with your time in terms of completing the online application that's routed through the gateway? And how many times did you go back to it? Did you get people to read it? And I suppose just on reflection, did you find the right way of approaching it, or did you spend too long on it? Do you know what I mean?
You want to go first, Isabel?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line. And I think I talked about this in my interview, actually, between working hard and working smart. So I could sit for hours and write my first few applications. I was guilty of that. But really, you just need to be focused and to think about, what am I really trying to put across in this application? So what I would tend to do is to just write one and then leave it for a couple of days, go away and come back to it with fresh eyes, and then really start to refine it. And I think that's when you can pick out the mistakes or things where you could probably have worded it differently, slightly better. So I found that to be really helpful to me, in just really restricting myself in, no, leave it, come back to it later, because there just reaches a point where you're not doing anything constructive. It's not going to serve any great purpose for you to spend a ridiculous number of hours on a singular application, really.
Yeah, I structured my time to an insane level when I was doing pupillage second round because I took it as a job. I was like, this is going to take a lot of time, a lot of hours. And I was working as a paralegal and I reduced my paralegal days to 4 days a week. And I spent 1 day a week doing pupillage applications. And I had this book. I should probably show people. It looks like something out of A Beautiful Mind. It's insane. Of all, like I said, I narrowed down where I wanted to work. I then had sort of boxes for, was it with Gateway? Have I done my application? Have I printed it out? I know I'm bad at proofreading my own work. I know I am. I always have been. So I had my uncle on standby to proofread for me. So if you know that's about something about yourself, get someone to proofread. And actually, if you've got no one in your family, I think there are professional proofreaders out there that probably don't cost that much money. And I know that lots of sets will just throw applications away that don't look polished. Yeah. So if you've got the capacity to do that, I think that that's a good tip. And I think just like Isabel said, you can spend hours on this. And you can go back to it and you can tweak and you can tweak. So to some extent, you just need to press send at some point. And that's what I did. I was like, this is the date where that application will be done. This is the date where that application will be done. And then I never looked at it again. Okay. Because if I looked at it again and I saw a typo, my stomach would drop. I would feel terrible or something like that. So as soon as it was sent, it was gone. I wasn't looking at it again. And I went in priority of where I wanted to work. So my unit chambers application was in very, very early. But I think that's probably a good idea because if you run out of time, you've got your best ones, the one you care about most in as well. But I was extremely structured when I did the second round of my applications.
Because if we look at the timeline, I mean, we've just come into January now, but since it's opened on the 3rd of January through to the 7th of February, I mean, that's a long time if you're living and breathing the process.
It is.
So is it worth you guys sharing how you balanced your time to make sure that you didn't get burnout or, your well-being wasn't compromised? How were you balancing that intensive process?
Yeah, I was working full-time as a paralegal like Bella. So I think that really helped me to structure my time and to ensure that I wasn't going to be burnt out because there only comes so many hours you can sit at a desk and do a singular application. So I would give myself, say, Friday evening off, maybe Saturday off, and then just treat the Sunday as the application day. Or if you're feeling like you've got a few hours spare in the week after work, put a few hours towards it. But it wasn't something I forced myself to do. I think you've got to be in the right mind frame to sit and do it because it's so important. You don't want to just be doing it because you think, oh, I really need to get this done. You need to be prepared and wanting to sit and focus on it.
Yeah, and I think actually, speaking about being in the right frame of mind, if you are not in the right frame of mind and you feel it, don't apply that year. Take a year off, get some experience and come back to it because you will always be better the year after you come back to it if you've got some relevant experience. And I knew I wasn't. The year I took off, I was like, my head is not in the right place. So, and I've spoken about this on a few of the podcasts and Rog will know what I'm about to say because I spoke about it in my interview, but I did confidence work. I knew that was something that I needed to work on. I was really down on myself. I wanted to be perfect and that wasn't possible. So the year I spent off, or like the 6 month leading up to the pupillage process, I got a book that was it was a sports psychology book and it really worked for me. So I think that thing of being in the right frame of mind is so important because it is hard. You're going to live and breathe it for at least probably 3 months.
Yeah.
So figure out what that is for you, whether that be you're into mindfulness, you're into yoga, you're into something that's going to help you, that's going to allow that chatter to turn off in your head. Do that. And that's the thing that will get you through to, I think that's the thing that will actually probably get you pupillage at the end, to be honest, not so much and the applications are really important. I'm not saying that, but that thing that gives you the extra sparkliness, the extra thing, the thing that will get you pupillage, I reckon that will be something that isn't in your application. It's something that's about you.
For sure.
Can I just ask you guys a question? Because in most sort of business sectors, and particularly in sport, what people would do is they would look ahead at the year group ahead of them and maybe 2 years ahead of them and find out the best people or the ones who've been successful. And they go and find those people and actually say, and go and sort of grab a coffee with them and say, what are all the things that you did well? What are the things that you could have done better? But you're learning from, the successful cohorts. That happens everywhere in business and sport. Does that happen with pupillage as well?
I think so. I mean, I think that I know it happens because people will reach out to you and say, hi, can you help me out? How did you manage that? I think social media is quite big on that. I don't know, when you got Pupillage, Isabel, did you get a lot of additional likes and follows on Twitter? Because I think that happens quite a lot when you get Pupillage. But I think there's another element of this where it is personal. So you can ask for those tips and tricks, but it's personal. And I think it's personal both for the applicant, but also for the set. So you've just said that you like the elevator pitch and you like that style. But I think it's very possible that another set might like something else.
Yeah.
So it's going to be that individual research to every place that you apply and how you approach that. That's going to really make the difference. Isabel, are you giving everyone life advice now? You're a pupil.
Yeah, I mean, definitely trying to help out anyone that does reach out. Not that I'm Pupillage expert #1 or anything, but I think with unit, what's helpful also is having the pupils online on the website. So I know some chambers don't have that, but I was able to see, say, Bella, Maisie, Kelsey, everyone's little part of the brochure on the unit website. So I think that's important too, because they're the people that you're going to be, you know, closest probably in age, but also in experience with. So I had a look through everyone. I thought, yeah, these look and sound like people that I'll probably get on with. I looked at what sort of things they've done in the past, what their interests, hobbies were, and just really how they'd pitched themselves in their part of the brochure. Because as we discussed earlier, your written application is you selling yourself. So I took a bit of inspiration from the other pupils and how they'd sort of worded their strengths and tailored that into my applications as far as possible.
All right. So this is a question for, I think, Lisa and Rog, because also Lisa has read many a Pupillage application in her time, I'm sure. But we have also a question from a listener, which is what this topic is. So Chloe's reached out to ask about whether or not, or how you should frame extenuating circumstances. So say, for example, you have put off part of the bar course, or you had to stop for some reason, or something like that. How would you frame that, and how can that be sort of framed as positive as opposed to something that holds your application back?
Well, I think the key answer is just be honest, be true to yourself. I mean, I think everyone appreciates that people fail, people stuff up, stuff happens in their lives that can affect their performance and so on. So we'd rather have that up front and have no surprises. So that would be the key, is be honest and no surprises. And it's much better being upfront and honest with some of those things, because I think everyone accepts that you stuff up at times or bad things happen, and you've got to deal with some of that adversity as well.
Yeah, I would say own it and frame it.
Yeah. And then another question that I think a lot of people have is, when there are references or recommendations, how is that best to approach it? And also a question I think I had was, should you name drop? If you know somebody, is it worth it? Is it going to hurt your application? Is that something that you would look at in a positive light?
I think if it's relevant, so as long as you can anchor it to something that is relevant to your application, so for us to unit, then absolutely. But if it's just a name drop for the sake of it, I probably wouldn't suggest that. You've probably got better things to be highlighting and prioritizing on your application than just referencing someone for the sake of it.
Yeah, and I think what you're looking for is also a range of references. If people say, I've got 3 judges as references or what have you, I'd be looking for a range depending on the experience. So, you know, I always think that the key person at bar school is always good, because there's a bit of an education point. I also like to see, you know, because you're looking at real people, like we like real work experience. So Claudia, who's about to join us, was a receptionist at Easy Hotel in Manchester. Isabel here worked in an ice cream parlor and so on. So actually, you know, dealing with real life people, customer service experience, adversity, but also putting those bosses down as well, because you want to hear, you know, from those people what they're like and dealing in those sort of customer experiences or people. So a mix of work, education, and then, you know, obviously law as well. And for us, family law is important.
Coming up on Family Law and More, Lisa and Bella will be joined by DNA Legal, who will be discussing forensic testing within the family law system. Join us then.
Great. Okay. Well, to round off the episode, Isabel, do you have a singular top tip that you would give someone in their written application process of the pupillage process?
My top tip is just to make your application extremely specific to the particular chambers. I think that's really what can win it or lose it. And it doesn't have to be I did a mini pupillage at this chambers. It could just be, you know, I've followed Barrister on Twitter and I think they're really engaging and really helpful. Or you've recently seen a published case that one of the barristers was mentioning, or just that you appreciate and are aligned with the values of the chambers. It could be anything. I just think it needs to be really specific to show why you are genuinely interested in being at that chambers.
Great. Lisa, top tip?
It's probably going to sound a bit cheesy, but just be yourself. That's what I want to connect to. And I think what Rog said before, and I'd maybe just go a bit further and say bookend it. So you've got, 20 seconds to grab us at the beginning, and you've got 10 seconds at the end for us to remember who you are when we're going through all the others. So be yourself and sell yourself.
Rog?
Yeah, I mean, I would also say be yourself because everyone else is taken. But I think on just this particular subject, particularly of the sort of gateway and the CV, I think perfect preparation makes perfect. And I think it's all about the preparation.
Yeah.
And if you get the preparation right, then I think you'll have a much better cover letter CV. And ultimately, you'll be more confident as you go into the interview process.
Yeah.
So, I know people go on about the timelines, but I would even go minus 90 days, 100 days to start thinking about this process.
Yeah.
Don't just start thinking about this process when the gateway opens. You've got to be starting thinking about this process beyond, so it's not just a mad rush. And that's why perfect preparation makes perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think this podcast probably will help the cohort for 2025.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the preparation process as well, for sure. And I think my top tip would be your application is important, but who you are is important as well. So, work on the bits of yourself that you think might need some help with this really difficult process, because it is really difficult. So if you're thinking, I don't feel confident, or how do I approach these interviews? How do I deal with, my mental health in that, deal with that alongside with the applications? Because for me, I'm sure that's the reason I got pupillage. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I think that was really helpful. Isabel, you are new to the podcast, so you get to play our Roll That Dice game. And for any new listeners, we've got this wonderful 6-sided dice that Lisa had made for us with 6 different games. So Isabel, if you're game, will you play the Roll That Dice game?
Of course. Thank you.
All right, quick fire questions. Yay. Okay, so very simple. I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to answer as fast as you can, no pausing. All right?
Okay.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
What's the favorite room in your house?
Lounge.
What's the worst thing someone could say to you on the underground?
Can I sit there?
Favorite place to go on holiday?
Italy.
Biggest phobia?
Spiders.
Oh, you knew that one fast. First celebrity crush?
Justin Bieber.
Best city you've ever lived in?
Newcastle.
Ooh. Biggest inspiration?
Oh, it's a tough one. I'd probably offend people by my answer here, but I'll say my mum.
Aww. Best flavour of crisps?
Salt and vinegar.
Who would play you in a movie?
Oh, probably just myself.
Nice. Love that. Too hot or too cold?
Too cold.
If you could only use one utensil for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Spoon.
That's the right answer, by the way. What superpower would you have?
Invisibility.
And finally, what's your favourite Disney movie?
Moana.
Oh, good one.
Yeah,
great.
Recent.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, listeners, for joining us on this episode. Our next one will be covering interview tips and tricks. So remember to subscribe, rate, and leave feedback for us. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time to Family Law and More.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.